Welcome back to another lecture. In today's class, we are going to see how to solve quadratic equation using factoring. And now for this class, we started by looking at when a is equals to 1 in my previous class. And then in this class, we're going to see when a is not 1 and when a is greater than 1. So in this video, let's remind ourselves of what we learned in the last class by solving these two questions. So what I'm going to do right now is to remind ourselves of what we did in the last class by solving these two questions. So what I'm going to do is I am going to say you should pause this video and solve these two questions and then come back and continue watching this video to find out what the solution will be. So for the first question, so what am I going to do? So I notice on the right hand side is not 0. So what am I going to do to make sure this -2 becomes 0? So the best thing you can do is to add 2 to both sides. So I'm going to add 2 to both sides, and then I will have n squared minus 10n plus 24 is equals to 0. And then the next thing I want to do, I wanted to look for two factors such that if I add these two numbers, it's going to give me -10. And then if I multiply the same two numbers, it's going to give me 24. And what are those numbers? Now I know those numbers will be -12. So right here will be -12 and then 2. So -12 and 2 is going to give me -10. -12 plus 2 is going to give me -10, which means the factors I'm looking for is -12 and then plus 2. And this should be equals to 0. And now, looking at the zero property that we talked about in the last class, we said that zero property should be that n minus 12 should be equals to 0, or n plus 2 should be equals to 0. So now I need to solve for n. So I need to add 12 to both sides right here. And then if I add 12 to both sides, I notice my n will be equals to 12. And then on the other side, I need to subtract 2 on this side, which means my n is equals to -2. So my answer to this question will be n is equals to 12 or n is equals to -2. Now, what about the question on the right? The question on the right, as I would want to do it, is I saw a GCF of 6, meaning I have to divide everything by 6. I'll divide everything by 6. And then if I divide everything by 6, what do you notice? I have n squared minus 3n minus 3 is equals to 1. And then in this case now, I wanted to make sure that this 1 is 0. So what I have on the right hand side should be 0. So I cannot make that 0. Just subtract 1 from both sides. And then if I subtract 1 from both sides, what do you notice? I have my n squared minus 3n minus 4 is equals to 0. So in this case now, all I need to do is that I am looking for two numbers that if I multiply these two numbers, I should have -4. And then if I add these two numbers, I should have -3. And then I multiply the same two numbers, I should have -4. What are those numbers? Now I notice that if I multiply -1, -4 times 1, it's going to give me -4. And then if I add -4 plus 1, it's going to give me -3. So my factors will be -4 and then plus 1. And then in this case, and then I can use the zero property that we just talked about, which means that n minus 4 will be equals to 0, or n plus 1 will be equals to 0. Now I need to solve for x. So how do I solve for x? Right here, I need to add 4. I need to add 4. So our focus for today's class will be when a is greater than 1. And when a is greater than 1, all we have to use is something called the slip and slide method. So that method is called the method I'm going to use in this video is called the slip and slide method. So that's the method I am going to use anytime I notice that my a is more than 1. So I'm going to use the slip and slide method. So let's see how we can use the slip and slide method for these three questions. As you all know that I am going to do the one on the left, while you are going to do the one on the right. So pay attention to this video and watch me do my first 3 questions, and then you do the other 3 questions. So what's the first thing I have to do? The first thing I have to do, I have to make sure that all the terms are on the left, and then the remaining term that I want on the right should be 0. So which means I need to move this to this side. So which means I need to subtract negative, I need to subtract 27 on both sides. So if I subtract 27 on both sides, I'm going to have 5k squared minus 27k plus 28 is equals to 0. And now what is the next thing I have to do? Because my A, what is my A? My A is 5. My A is 5. I am going to take that A, then I am going to slide, I'm going to slip that. So let's slip that. Use it to multiply this one right here. We're going to use that to multiply C. And then if I use that one to multiply C, I notice I will have my K squared minus 27. Now, what is 5 times 28? 5 times 28, if I'm not mistaken, it should give me 140 is equals to 0. Now, here is what we have to do. I'm just going to continue this right here. So now, here is what we have to do. What we have to do now is to find 2 numbers that if I add those 2 numbers, I should have negative 27. And then if I multiply those 2 numbers, I should have 140. So how am I going to do that? To do that, all I'm going to do, I want to write my k first, just like this, write it like that, set it to be equal to 0. Now let's find out 2 numbers. Now if I multiply these 2 numbers, I should have 140. And then if I add the same 2 numbers, I should have 27. What are those numbers? Those numbers will be negative 20. And then another number will be negative 7, right? Because if I multiply these two, it should give me 140, and then negative 20 times plus negative 7 should be negative 27. So those numbers should be negative 20 and negative 7. Now notice something. Am I done? No, I am not done. Now remember that I use this number right here to to multiply this C right here, right? So I'm going to take the same number, which is 5. I'm going to use it to divide each of those factors. So I'm going to take the same number that I used to multiply earlier, which is 5. I'm going to use it to divide each of those factors. And now what is the next thing I have to do? The next thing I have to do in this case now is to make sure that those fractions are simplified to the lowest term. So now what is 20 divided by 5? 20 divided by 5 will give me 4. So that will be negative 4. And then what about 7 divided by 5? 7 divided by 5 has been simplified to the lowest term. So this has been simplified to the lowest term. And then I set this to be equal to 0. Now, since I still have this fraction, I am going to take this fraction and then I'm going to slide that. So I'm going to slide. So remember I said this method is what? Slip and slide. So we are going to slide that. So once I slide that, I am going to have 5k minus 7 is equals to 0. Now, I can use my zero product property that we saw earlier, which means I will say k minus 4 is equals to 0, or 5k minus 7 is equals to 0. And then I solve for k. Solving for k, I have plus 4 right here, plus 4 right there, and then my k will be equals to 4. Or in the other side, first thing I want to do, I want to add 7 to both sides, and then I have my 5k is equals to 7. And now what will be my k? My k will now be 7 divided by 5. So my answer to this question would be that k is equals to 4 or 7 over 5. If you wanted to know if you're right or wrong, all I am going to say is that you take this first question and then you graph it. You graph this first question using whether your calculator or using Desmos. Once you graph it, and then you check for the s-intercept, or you check for the solution, or you check for the root, you're going to see that your solution will be 4 or 7 divided by 5. And then we know that 7 divided by 5 is going to give me 1.4. If I'm not mistaken, it should give us 1.4. And now let's go to the next question. So I'm just going to erase all of this. So give me a minute. Let me erase all of this. And then because I need that space to do the next question. So let's take all of this off. And then let's do the next question. So for my next question, I am going to do the same thing. So for the same thing, I want to make sure that everything I have on this side should be 0. So how can I make that to be equal to 0? So the first thing I want to do is to move this over here and then move this one to over there. So meaning I need to subtract -3 and then I need to add 7a. So all I have to do is that I need to subtract 3 and then I need to add 7 and then this will be equal to 0. And then the next thing I want to do now is to collect the like terms. So what are the like terms? Then the like terms in this case is this and that. And then that one will give me plus 4a minus 3 is equals to 0. Now, let me continue over here. So if I continue over there, so I have 15a squared plus 4a minus 3 is equals to 0. Now, remember my a right here is 15, right? So because my a is 15 is not equals to 1, what I'm going to do now is I am going to slip that. So I'm going to slip that. So which means I have a squared plus 4a, and then that one will give me 15 times 3 will give me 45 is equals to 0. Now I need two numbers that if I add these two numbers, I should have 4. And then if I multiply these two numbers, I should have -45. Now let me ask you real quick, what do you think those two numbers would be? So you pause this video, you tell me what do you think those two numbers should be. So those two numbers should be 9, -9, and +5, right? So -9, +5 is going to give me -9. Sorry, that's incorrect. So this one should be 9 and -5. So 9, -5, and then this one will be 9, -5. So in this case now, if I check it, 9 plus -5, that's 4. That's right. 9 times -5, that's 45. So our factors now will then be +9 and -5. And then now, am I done? No, I am not done. Don't forget, as I said, don't forget, now that our a is not 1, is 15, you have to take that number and then use it to divide each of those factors. So I will take those numbers, I will use it to divide each of those factors. So I'll take those numbers, use it to divide those factors. And now, what is the next thing that I did from the other video? The next thing that I did in the other video is to make sure that those factors or those fractions are simplified to the lowest form. So now what is 9 divided by 15 to the lowest form? This one is going to give me 3 divided by 5. And then what is, 5 divided by 15 to the lowest term is going to be 1 divided by 3 is equals to 0. And then what next thing I have to do? Now that they are simplified, I have to slide. So I have to slide this one, and then I have to slide that one. So if you slide, what do you notice? You notice this one is going to be 5a plus 3, and then 3a minus 1 is equals to 0. And then what is the next thing I have to do? The next thing I have to do is to use the zero product property. And then the zero product property has said that 5a plus 3 is equals to 0, or 3a minus 1 is equals to 0. And then let's solve for a. So in this case, I'll subtract 3. So I have my 5a is equals to -3, which means my a should be -3 divided by 5 on this side, or on the other side, I'll add 1. So I have 3a is equals to 1. And my a will be 1 divided by 3. So that would be my solution to the second question. So that will be my solution to the second question. And let's see how to solve the third question. The third question looks like something that's too much, but it's not. It's the same approach. So I'm going to erase all of this, and then we're going to see how to solve question 3. And then at the end of question 3, and then I will leave this to you to solve the other 3 questions. So let's see how to solve question 3. What's the next thing I have to do? Basically the same thing that we'll be doing, making sure that everything on this side is 0. So how can I make that to be equal to 0? So to make that to be equal to 0, all I need to do is to add 30 to both sides. So I'm going to add 30 to both sides. So I add 30 to both sides, and then I would subtract 11r from both sides, and then that will be equal to 0. Now the next thing I have to do, collect the like terms. So I have 5r squared like terms. This and this, they are like terms, so I have negative 55r, and then this and this, they are like terms, so I have this one to be 150 is equals to 0. Do you think I can simplify this more further to make it easy for me? Of course, yes, I can do that, because I noticed that 5 is like a GCF. 5 can divide everything, right? So divide everything by 5. Divide everything by 5. Once I divide everything by 5, what do you notice? I have my r squared minus 11r plus 30 is equals to 0. Now, I need two numbers that if I multiply these two numbers, I should have positive 30. If I multiply these two numbers, I should have positive 30. And then if I have the same two numbers, I should have negative 11. And what are those numbers? Negative 6 and negative 5. Negative 6, negative 5. And now in this case, which means I have negative 6, negative 5. And then the next thing I'm going to do is to use the zero product property. What's the zero product property again? By taking each of those terms and setting them to be equal to 0. Take those terms. Oh, did I miss something? No, I did not miss something. I did not have to divide nothing, because my a in this case is 1. I don't have to divide nothing, because this one looks like what we did in the previous class. So this one will be r minus 5 is equals to 0. Now let's solve for r plus 6 on both sides. So my r is equals to 6. Or I need to add 5. So my r is equals to 5. And that would be my solution to this question. Now it's now your turn to answer these 3 questions, and I would love to see your answers. And then once you're done with those 3 questions, go ahead and let's also answer these 2 questions. Let's go ahead. Once you're done with that, go ahead and answer these 2 questions. And I would be looking forward to seeing your answers. If you have any questions, just let me know. I will be happy to help. Also, for your exit ticket for this class, I will say that we answer this first, 3 questions for an exit ticket. So this one is gonna be your independent practice. So this one is gonna be your independent practice. Make sure you do this on your own. And then why these, 5 questions? Why these first 3 questions? And then these 2 questions, make sure you work in group. Make sure you work with a partner. Make sure we work with somebody and ask questions. Make sure you work together, and let's get the solution to all of these questions. I hope to see you in the next class. Let me know if you have a question.